Hello and welcome. I'm Jane and I love painting and drawing and just generally messing about with art. I think this is probably going to be my first YouTube video, which is super exciting. I thought I would try to draw this beautiful rabbit that you can see here in the reference image. I think I found it on Pinterest and I'll leave it linked below in the description in case anybody else wants to have a go at it. It's a sleeping rabbit, not a dead one on a blanket, as my son thought when he saw the version of it that I'd attempted to draw. But no, a sleeping rabbit on sand. And I'm just going in to start with pencil, mechanical pencil, just getting the rough outline, mapping out the shadows and the lights and the main features of the rabbit before erasing that and going back in with the coloured pencils. And it is quite ridiculous how long I took trying to build up value. It's as if I was furiously scribbling, but nothing was happening. I think I was so worried and so tentative and timid that I was barely putting any pressure on. And I know that that you are supposed to do that with coloured pencils. I know you're supposed to take time and you're supposed to gently layer. But even so, I feel like I could have done it much more quickly. And yeah, so I just started out trying to lay down some colours for the background. Lots of pinks and purples. And then just going around the edges of the rabbit, trying to work on the form of the rabbit a bit. But very, very timidly. I had no idea what I was doing throughout the whole thing, honestly. And I'm amazed it turned out as well as it did. Certainly, I had no confidence that it would. Yeah, the reason I chose this picture, this photo reference on Pinterest, was because of the light and shadow. I'm really interested in that. I'm really interested in trying to capture it. And I don't think I do it particularly successfully in this. It's not too bad, for a medium that I'm not used to. But definitely the light area on his tummy. You can just see now I'm going around the shadow area. But on the middle part of his tummy, there's this streak of light. And it came out a bit muddy and a bit, not as vibrant as I wanted it to be. And yeah, finally I've got out the cool grey deep. And I'm just trying to darken things down a little, outline things a little bit. And afterwards I did feel like I'd gone a bit too far, just above his eye there. But it's just to make things more obvious, just to give it a bit of definition, especially for his face, that's probably the focal point. But yeah, just colouring in around his little lips. There's kind of a little pink thing on the rabbit's muzzle, if that's what you call it. Trying to define the features a little bit, trying to, be brave and press a little more heavily with the pencil to make a more significant mark. And as I went on, I did definitely get more and more confident. I certainly felt like you have an opportunity to rectify mistakes with coloured pencils, but maybe that's because I was pressing so lightly. And I was using two different kinds of brown at this point, I think. Earth green and Chinese orange. Maybe the sepia as well. But again, I'm working on the background, trying to add a bit of variety in with, I think, some greens and some blues. And actually that's a purple colour again, and also some pink. I used quite a bright kind of pink to try to bring some vibrancy to it. And then working on the value of the actual rabbit, trying to create a little bit of form there by using a dark brown, which I think it was what brown was that? Burnt umber, I think. Just a little something about the supplies that I'm using. I'm using Castle colouring pencils. I had bought a really cheap set of colouring pencils and hated them. And then I watched a review by Sarah Renee Clark on just about 50 billion different types of pencils. Bless her for doing all that work. And Castle coloured pencils came up really well, so I thought I would try them because they're so cheap. And I really like them. And I'm just putting in a bit of blue there for the shaded area of his white tummy, going back in with more of a fluorescent blue. And then again trying to create the shadow shapes in the sand and sort of behind and underneath the rabbit with some really deep purples mostly. One of my favourite colours that I've discovered throughout this process is Chinese orange, and you can see that up on his shoulder area. Really enjoyed using that. So yeah, it was a sort of a mix of fun and frustrating. I think it took something like over 5 hours to do this, and I think that was the frustrating part. I was feeling like, oh my god, I'm dedicating a huge amount of time and I don't seem to be making much progress. I did get a bit more confident as I went along, so... And once more trying to work on the sand a bit, this time with some muted pinks and also the purple. This was a little... I kind of regretted this. I feel like I went in a bit too strongly there with some of those shadows. It's where his fur is all going at different angles. It's quite deep, thick fur. And you do have some areas that are quite dark, like little tiny recesses, if that makes any sense. You know, where the fur is going off at different angles and creating shadows. It kind of just looks a bit like spots from here. Doesn't look as it should. But anyway, it was, you know, I did my best. And yeah, lots of blues, lots of purples. Trying to define the highlighted area of his tail by working on the sand. And then I realised afterwards that I just needed to stray away from the reference photo a little bit in order to make the shadow more obvious. And then here, oh my goodness, did I regret this. Trying to bring back some of the highlight really. I felt like I'd gone too gloomy and too grey, and so I used that little thin rubber. It was like a mechanical rubber, and oh my goodness, what a disaster. It just, the little bits of rubber fell off and onto the page, and I couldn't get them off. I even tried a scraper, you know, like a palette knife, to get them off, and occasionally my fingernail trying to gouge out those little black specks, but they didn't come out. So I don't think I'll use that eraser again. And later on, in fact, not, you know, I've almost finished this now really. In a bit I use a, what would you call it? It's a rubber, but it's got a motor in it, so a motorised rubber? I don't know, it's a Derwent rubber. And I used that to try and bring back some of the highlights and to add a little bit of texture into his fur. If you can see there, particularly along the shadow area at the bottom there, below the sort of sunlit area of his brown fur. And I think that worked really well actually. It was a little bit scary using it, and it was my first time using it, so I think I overdid it a little bit, but then I was able to go back with the coloured pencils and you know, hide that sort of colour back in certain areas so that it wasn't huge chunks of just pure page colour. And that worked really well, and I'm so pleased with how it turned out. This is a photo that we're looking at the end here, and the colours seem to be much more vibrant in the photo that I took than it did in the video. But anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching if you're still here, and I'll catch you again.